What you guys, got another video here for you. Stop buying cheap power supplies. This is what we're going to be talking about in this video. I see so many people on YouTube promoting cheap PCs, and the way they get it cheap is by putting in cheap power supplies, just like these ones right here. They either buy them used or they will buy them brand new. The wattage on these is really abysmal. You can see the 12-volt rail with 12 amps. You times that together and all you get is 144 watts on a 300 watt power supply. Now they'll put this into a cheap PC and then flip it for a profit. And the reason why they're doing this is because they're trying to build cheap gaming systems, and the way they do that is by cheaping out on critical components like the power supply, and they'll either buy them used or they'll buy them new because they're cheap enough. But the problem is they're not good enough, and when you're selling PCs, you should be putting in a good power supply to make sure that power supply is adequate enough to run the graphics card and all of the other components that you're putting in it. It's the most thing that most of these people will cheap out on to try and keep the costs down. So if you go and watch any of those channels, you're going to probably see there's going to be an unknown, unbranded power supply in there, which obviously says 500 watts on the side or 600 watts on the side of the box, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're getting that wattage through the 12-volt rail. And it seems like a lot of these people don't care because they're not going to have the PC for that long because they're going to flip it. And there's a right way of doing things and a wrong way. Look at this one right here, black 500 watt desktop power supply. You can see it's got black cables. It looks pretty nice. They will show you close-up images of it, but they never show you the actual label on the side, which gives you all of the power readings. And that's because they don't want you calculating it and finding out that most of the high power ratings are all on the ones that you don't need, like the +3 and the +5 volts. They will put a lot of it on there to add up to a larger figure. It's on the 12-volt rail is what is going to drive the graphics card and most of the other key components in there. You do want a high wattage on there, but unfortunately they're not showing you it. You can see here is another one, 750 watts, and it says £38.51. Quite attractive. If you're building cheap gaming PCs, this is the one they're going to go for because they're going to get more profit for themselves. And if you look again, you don't see the label. The label is blurred out and you can't really see it that clearly. And this is pretty common. There's another site right here. I'll go to their website and we'll take a look at the label to see whether we can see what it says. There's the label right here. Let's zoom in, and they've conveniently blurred it out so you can't see it. And PC flippers will use this technique all the time where they will cheap out on the power supply just to keep the costs down. Also, when they're creating YouTube content, they obviously have a budget to stick to, and to keep that budget as low as possible, they will go ahead and put a cheap power supply in, and this is how they can keep that cost down by putting in, say, a £15 power supply in there. Realistically, you're not going to be able to put a decent power supply in there for £15. Now, this CX500 is from Corsair, and you can see they do actually show you you're going to get 456 watts on the 12-volt rail. It's telling you that you're getting 456 watts out of 500 watts on that 12-volt rail, which is much more better than what you're seeing with this professional power supply right here. And I've actually done a video on this. The images are very small. They don't want you looking too close to it because it weighs as much as a packet of cigarettes. It's not that heavy. And the components they use in these power supplies are pretty low quality. The cables and also the components inside. You can't buy a decent power supply for the amount of money they're selling these for. And they're just cheap, rubbish power supplies which you should steer clear of. Even if they've got labels on them that state really high specifications, they're just not really true. And when you put them on a tester, you'll probably find that they are not accurate and they are not going to be giving you the wattage that you want. So for instance, these ones right here, this one is one of the higher level ones that I can see, which is 850 watts, and you're getting 500 odd watts on the 12-volt rail. But would I use this power supply in any of my builds? No, I wouldn't. And that's because it's unbranded and it's from China, and it's just cheap, the same as this one right here. And if you look on places like eBay, Facebook, and also Amazon, where they're selling gaming systems, they will put these into their builds because they're cheap. They buy them by the box load. They're OEM power supplies. They're just cheap, and it keeps the cost down, and that means more profit for them. And it's the same thing with YouTubers. I see the same thing where they're building PCs for $100 or $200 and basically flipping them and making $400 profits and $300 profits. But you have to look at the components they're putting in there, and half of it is just cheap rubbish like this. They use a lot of used parts as well, and they put it together and then they make a massive profit on it because people that are buying them just don't know what they're buying. You can see stuff like this. The box is cheap. It says 500 watts on the side. It's £19.49. If you look at the specs here on the 12-volt rail, you can see when you add all of this up, it's not that great. It's 300 watts on a 500-watt power supply. So you put this in a build and it is going to work, it is going to power on, and it's going to be able to play games for a little while. But eventually what's going to happen is, because you're using such poor quality power supplies and the wattage is really low, you're pushing it or exceeding it to its maximum. If it's drawing more power than it can deliver, eventually it's going to go pop. Now here's a typical example of a power supply which is a much better quality power supply, but look at the price difference. It's £89, it's used, but you can see already 850 watt gold certified fully modular power supply, and brand new you can pick these up for £109. So is it worth spending £89 on a used one when you can buy a brand new one for £109? There's another one for £97.98, and again you can see that's quite an expensive cost, but it is a very good power supply, and these are the sorts of power supplies that you should be putting into builds when you are flipping PCs or when you are using a PC for yourself, because it's good quality power that you're putting in there. It's going to protect all your computer components in there. So I guess you have to ask yourself this question: is putting in cheap components into a build and then flipping it for maximum profit, does that make you out to be a bit of a con artist? In my personal opinion, it does. I mean, I've sold thousands of PCs over the years, and I've always put my name to it with confidence and putting in quality components in those PC builds. Yes, you might not make as much profit in there by doing that, but at least you are passing on that PC to someone knowing that it's got your name on it and it has got quality components in there. If you are using used components, at least put in decent quality used components in there, and that way you are passing it on to the customer as well, knowing they're getting a good quality PC, without thinking, how can I make maximum profit on this PC build or PC flip by putting in cheap components, because someone who's buying it is not going to know, because they don't know. And this is the problem. That makes you a con artist by doing that in that sense. So if you're one of those people that are flipping PCs for a profit, then make sure you're putting in quality components instead of putting in rubbish stuff like this, which in my opinion is just not fit for purpose. Another thing I see people doing is buying old Dell systems or old HP systems, ripping the guts out of it, putting it into a brand new case with some RGB, putting a cheap power supply in there and calling it a gaming system and trying to make maximum profit by doing that. That is morally wrong, and you shouldn't be doing that if you're selling PCs. And this is what people are doing. It's quite popular now, and a lot of people are taking it up. Now, if you go to a PSU tier list, there's quite a few of them that have been created over the years. These will give you a rough idea of what decent power supplies are and what poor power supplies are. It's not 100% accurate, but it does give you some sort of guideline of what's decent and what's bad. Problem is, you're probably never going to see any of those power supplies on here because they're just not that great at all. So you want to avoid them like the plague. So my final message is, if you are flipping PCs for a profit, make sure you're giving that person a decent PC with some decent components in it, and that way you're not ripping the person off to make maximum profit for yourself, because then that makes you a con artist. Anyway, with that said, I think that's going to be about it for this video. Remember, the power supply is probably one of the most important components in that computer because it's giving power to all of the other components, and it needs to be of good quality if you're going to use one. My name has been Brian from briteccomputers.co.uk. Hope this video has been some sort of use to you. Just want to say a quick shout out to all my YouTube members who have joined my YouTube members group. I really do appreciate the support. and I shall catch you in the very next video, or I'll catch you on the Discord server for a chat. Bye for now.